Good morning. Welcome to everybody. I'm going to ask Janie to share her screen.
All right, thank you.
So a couple of pieces from our end. Janae is with us today. She's our director of our consortium. She's going to be monitoring the chat. So if questions come up as we are going, feel free to either raise your hand and ask the question or put the question in chat. And we are definitely encouraging people to participate as we go through this. We don't want to wait until the end. We understand that things come up as you are seeing the information. So please feel free to interact with us as we go through this. Great. So we are.
You did the intro. I was going to do the intro.
Go for it.
All right. Hello, everybody. Janie Garcia here. I come to you from Foothill College. My colleague Lisa comes to you from De Anza College. Today, we're here really to mainly focus on how we in our consortium, which includes 3 adult schools and our 2 community colleges, Foothill and De Anza College, expanded dual enrollment at the community college to adult school students beyond just the high school diploma GED programs. And we actually have done that and extended to students in all CAEP funded programs through the state. So today, as Felisa said, we have a prepared presentation, but we really would like you guys to be able to ask questions, because that's what we found in the past is the most helpful. And then again, like Felisa said, Janae Crane's here with us. I don't know if Janae, you wanted to say anything. Sorry to put you on the spot. She's our director of the consortium, so she's here as well to help us with the chat.
All right, good morning. Yeah, just good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for being here early too. So hopefully you got coffee in hand and we can get started. Felisa, you want to take it away?
Sure. So we decided that we wanted to make sure, okay, so there's a little bit of background information. Janie and I both come from the adult school world within our consortium. So she was previously at Mountain View Los Altos Adult School, and I was at Fremont Union High School Adult School. And so we recognized that there was a need to create a pathway for adult school students into the community colleges. And for having a K-12 background, we didn't really understand why it wasn't okay to use this special admit process that the high schools had. They have it established. It's been around forever. Students can be considered a special admit. Their fees get waived. It doesn't start their college careers, right? All these things were pieces that we recognize adult school students should also be able to benefit from.
And just to add a little more context, we also should probably pause for a moment and talk about kind of the terminology here. So we hear dual enrollment, and at least at our respective colleges, dual enrollment can look different in even though it's just addressing high school students, even within that population, it can look different. As you may be familiar with, we have CAEP agreements. We also have cohort models of high school students because that was our pre-existing dual enrollment that we support. But we also have an opportunity for students to just take a one-off class from any high school, as long as they have the permission from their counselor and or administrator at the high schools. And that's what we refer to as special admit. So it's still dual enrollment, but it's not in the cohort or CAEP model, but rather individual student ways. Let me go ahead and change the slide.
So we found out then back in the day, I think it actually might have been at a CAEP Summit in 2015, that who is a special admit criteria is actually a local board decision. Previously, we had kind of come up against these roadblocks where there was kind of some misinterpretation of what special admit could be and who got to decide that. And so we found out it was a local board decision. And so we kind of really started then in 2015 trying to figure out then how we get people to understand that adult schools need to be able to have the same kind of dual enrollment opportunities. So then in 2017, at this point, I had transitioned over to De Anza. My role at De Anza, I'm a counselor in language arts for adult school transitions. And so we did an opening day workshop. Our district does opening days. They come together and everybody gets to come to workshops and talk about what's happening for the year. So we did one with a student panel, and we definitely got people to, I think, to start understanding who adult school students were. They started to understand what work they could do to get involved. And it was actually really beneficial for us to be able to have people start, understanding their role in supporting our adult schools.
Lisa, we have a couple questions that just popped in the chat.
So special admin is a local board decision at the community college level. So who gets to be considered a special admin actually is decided by a district, a community college district. And then in 2019, we also did another opening day presentation. And this one was super important for us to be able to get the right people at the table. Our old director, Peggy Runlindy, was really instrumental in kind of hounding our board at the community college and our chancellor, and got numerous board members and the chancellor to come and see a lot of the data that we were working with students, how many students were being served by our local adult schools and how many of them were CAEP funded and what that meant in terms of potential pathways in. And so at this presentation, we actually brought up the idea that we really want to be able to have there be this special admin. We know that students being dual enrolled is a way to get students into the community colleges, right? It's a proven method. And so when we were bringing it up, we had multiple board members. We said, really want to get this done by the end of this year. This is the goal. And one of the board members, who's now our president of the board, was like, that seems too long from now. Let's have your goal be December and not June. And so it really kind of set the tone for us really trying to figure out how we get it through the channels and up to the board.
Absolutely. And all I could really add to that wonderful summation that Felisa gave us is that, prior to taking it to the board, even though SB 554 existed and gave adult school students in high school diploma and GED programs, state permission to join through dual enrollment at the community college, we still were getting pushback from the community colleges, even with Felisa working on that side. And so for us, the proposal to extend the opportunity to students from more CAEP funded programs than just secondary education also really established this systematic opportunity for students, right? So in addition to what we extended, it was also a great gateway for us to be like, look, we have the board support, and this is instrumental to where we've become, or where we've gotten to in terms of this in terms of this work. Sorry. All right.
Yeah, and actually, technically, when we started this work, SB 554 hadn't come through yet. We started the work because we recognized it. And then what happened with SB 554 is that it legitimized that this was something that we should be working on. So at the time, opening days are in September. SB 54, I think, happened almost immediately after that. And so it really did kind of give us the legitimacy, right, to continue doing the work that we wanted to. So this is the ed code that we use to justify how and why special admin is a local board decision at the community college. And so we use this as part of our proposal so that we could say, like, look, this is in fact something that we get to do. We have the jurisdiction to do. And that was super helpful in our proposal, obviously.
Felisa, we have a request in the chat from that could the slides be shared in the chat?
Sure.
Yes, I can definitely do that.
I just volunteered Jane to do that. Yes. Sounds great.
You know me well enough to know I would be down.
Correct.
I just wanted to add to that this language is actually, this ed code is actually cited within the SB 554 bill as well. And so that to us really signified, like Felisa was saying, the legitimacy of this. So I'll go ahead and switch slides and then drop that file in the chat.
Okay, so once we really had the ed code, we had the precedent, we had the board on, board, and we then had SB 554 that came into place. It was really time for us to figure out how to physically implement this. One of the things that was really difficult for us in the beginning is when we were on the adult school side, there's definitely a lost in translation moment that happens between the adult schools and community college, right? We just don't speak the same language often. And so we were trying to kind of figure out how we get it put places, who needs to go, what shared governance is. And until we were on the community college side and we were speaking community college lingo, it definitely became harder for us to navigate that. So once all those pieces came into play, we really started the work.
Let me give you a break, Felisa, if you want.
Go for it.
So we really wanted to highlight, in terms of this achievement, what has really helped in our consortium. And we've noticed that there are 4 primary work groups that have really been the greatest focus of the work that we've been doing. I'm actually going to pause for a second. I am not able to drop a file for our PowerPoint, but I am going to convert it into a link and drop it before the end, I promise. So we found that student support was a huge work group focus for us. And this really is where we brought people from all institutions to make sure that we're talking about those wraparound services and we're talking about the warm handoff and all those elements that really support adult school students, especially into such a big leap or transition into a scary world. Felisa, I will always give her the credit of saying that, most of our students, adult school and others, have trouble even getting past our community college parking lots. It can be such an intimidating experience. And so our student support group has always focused on what ways we can support a student into making as warm and as easy of a transition as possible. And then of course, data, right? We definitely have a lot of important work that we've had to do there to make sure that we're getting this buy-in and also keeping our work focused on the why, that we're always knowing what the importance is of the transition itself, but also what type of programs our students are interested in, what kind of jobs are going to be the most lucrative for them, and all of those things. We actually even worked on a data dashboard, because I don't know if your community college folks are in here, but it wasn't as easy as going into Banner to get data on adult school students. And so our data work team has done a lot of wonderful work within all institutions to track the data of adult school transitions, either the ones that we don't know about, but also the ones that we've been fostering. Professional development is another consortium work group that we've been doing a lot of work in. And then another huge one is articulation and alignment. I would say that we kind of split that group into CTE focus as well as ESL focus, because for us, those are the biggest areas where we're trying to figure out how our adult schools and our community college curriculum align so that we can, really inform the pathways and make that process more successful for students. Another key element of our work groups is that we require representation from all 5 institutions. Require is a bit of a strong word, we'll take who we can get. But to give you an example, we have worked hard at making sure for student support, as an example, has college deans, faculty from both the adult school system and the college system, classified staff, especially at adult schools and community colleges. Those are the people who really create the bonds with students and help students through the barriers that we're trying to make, at least lighter on students. Department chairs. I don't know, again, if there's any community college people in here, we probably should have asked that in the chat. But the community college system is a hard system to navigate. And so we really needed to make sure that the right people were at the table. And then of course, counselors. So Felisa's role, for example, on the community college, but also the transition staff that are on the side of the adult schools.
Actually, can we take a real quick pause and have people put in the chat their role on their site, just so we can kind of get a sense of who is in the room? We probably should have done that, like Jamie said. And while you guys start to do that, I just want to say one of the things that made it really, one of the things we did a lot of work in getting that amount of people from both community colleges and the adult school sides in the room together was about making sure that we were kind of defining like terms with people at the community college and the adult schools, right? There's a lot of misconception about who adult school students are. It's not just ESL, it's this whole big population, right? We've got CTE, we've got ESL, we've got ABE, ASC, and there's a whole language, right? And so we really did spend a lot of time being in spaces where, Janie and I especially were really good about kind of squeezing into spaces where they had traditionally only invited high school partners. And we would show up as adult school partners as well and always be in the room, and adult schools and adult schools and adult schools. And so we've been broken records in ways that have allowed people to now understand they kind of automatically include adult schools now in language, in our academic senates, in our budget and planning teams, at the community college side. And there was a lot of legwork that was put into that, so that people understood who the adult school students were.
Yeah, it's perfectly fitting that we're right on the border of Halloween, because there was even a memorable moment where I chased down the assessment director at De Anza College in a bumblebee costume, because, you know, there's no holiday break for us in adult school. And that was actually when I was an adult school employee. So you really got to do anything you can and take any moment you can. And you know what? He probably remembered me. So to be honest, I just completely forgot I was in a Halloween costume.
Yeah, I mean, it took us a long time, right, to be able to advocate for that language to just kind of be part of the vernacular at community college. So if these things aren't happening already at your sites, just know, like, it is a slow process, but you will get there, right? This is definitely, there was a lot of years of legwork, right? We started this in 2015. It's not like this happened overnight. Okay, great. Let's go back, Janie, to the presentation, please.
So let me make sure I'm still unmuted. So another thing, right, was college buy-in, right? And Felisa really just gave us a nice introduction into that, in that, you know, and Felisa and I can speak to this from as two people who have been in this process since the implementation stage of AB 86, to where we really acknowledged for our consortium anyways, that the adult schools would really have to do a lot of work to get to the level of where, especially just financially, where community colleges are like, okay, wait, like, yes, we need to prioritize this. You know, this may be a blip of money back then to what a community college has to shell out during an academic year. So we really acknowledged that, and we really took it head on as a consortium, especially on the adult school side. And the college buy-in has been so instrumental. One of the greatest opportunities that has really shown improvement in our working together as institutions is having both new and existing community college positions that have added or created job descriptions that include focusing on adult school populations. And the best examples that we have of that are our counselors. And I'm going to have Felisa talk a little bit more about that role, because that's the one that she actually holds on the De Anza College campus. I hold the adult school coordinator position in outreach. So I'm able to work with students who are transitioning and give them that specialized support that I know from working almost 10 years in the adult school. But I've also been able to support ESL and adult learner populations just in general, who really need the same kind of treatment. I think we often say that, you know, specialized populations get this, you know, specialized treatment, but the truth is all students benefit from the warm handoff, from the transition, from taking the time to know more about AB 540 or know more about, you know, the wraparound services a student needs to be successful. All students are going to benefit from that. And then also our CTE coordinator. CTE is a huge commonality between the adult schools and the community colleges. So we needed that buy-in to exist on the other side. And I'm going to turn it over to Felisa to please add more.
So a couple of things about these positions. So Janie and I, so Janie is the adult school coordinator through outreach at Foothill, and me as the counselor for adult school transitions. We are both CAEP funded. Our positions are 100% CAEP funded. And that's important because what happened with those positions specifically is it came out directly of the work we were doing as a consortium, right? We kept telling them they needed to have somebody at the community college that understood this population, that believed in this population, that understood what it took to be able to support adult schools and everything that makes them a really unique world that we obviously are passionate about and love. We've been a part of the adult school world, like Janie said, since before AB 86 days. And so it was really awesome to be able to see them prioritize their CAEP funding, you know, in these ways to create these positions that allowed students to have a direct contact at the sites. Our CTE coordinator, and this was actually a really awesome growth for us. She is not CAEP funded, but her job description intentionally started to include working with adult schools. And that was a transition, right? From being like, okay, we're going to throw these CAEP funded positions in to do this work. And then there was this expansion of now creating. So now in my program, in my language arts counseling department, we have 4 counselors. And of the 4, 2 of us are CAEP funded and 3 of us have adult schools directly in our job description. And that expansion, I think it goes back to this idea that Janie and I would do things like show up in Bumblebee costumes, right? And make sure people knew that adult schools needed to be in this space as well. And that was important. And that's just a quick clarification about how we're funded on our sites.
And then do you want to talk a little bit about your counseling position, how that works or no?
Sure. So as a community college counselor, there was a lot of growing pains for me, right? I had only done alternative education. I'd only done adult schools. So just the sheer number of students was definitely a transition. But it's nice because we work directly with the adult school transition. We call them counselors or advisors, depending on the site. We have 3 different adult schools that we work with. And I work directly with them. So if they have a student that's coming over, whether it's for dual enrollment or otherwise, they'll help them make an appointment with me. They send me an email that says the student's coming over. I then can either, when we were on site, would call them ahead of time and meet them at the parking lot and walk them to my office and show them how to do the parking. And so my role is a little bit unique in terms of how community college positions for counseling normally go. I do a lot more outreach. We spend a lot of time at the adult schools in classrooms with students, asking questions, exposing them to community college and options, whether it's CTE or an associate's or transfer. And so that there's a lot of my position that includes some outreach in it already. So I'm appreciative that they were able to understand that this role needed to be unique and that we needed to be able to create it to meet student needs. And then some of the other things that have happened recently is, especially for De Anza hasn't ever really had to think about making spaces that are as innovative as they have been. They've always had a really high enrollment. And so with this adult school conversations and having adult schools kind of at the forefront of these conversations, we've now had like our ESL departments update their course offerings and curriculum to make sure that adult school students are being benefited by that. And that was a big piece of it. And then in our student support work group is actually, because we had all these people that were in the room, we actually said, okay, how do we create, what do we want this special admin to say? How do we get this to be something that is working for students? And then what do we do with it from that point forward? So it actually came out of the work directly with the people that had the buy-in. Anything to add, Jeannie?
No, I don't think so. I'm still trying to figure out this PDF link. Sorry, I'm multitasking over here, probably not very well. So that brings us to the proposal. Really, like we've kind of alluded to already, is we knew that we had to navigate the community college system, especially within shared governance well. So the steps that we really had to do in order to get to this point of board approval is first draft the proposal. That was a big factor in giving us an opportunity to say why this is so important. Thankfully, as you notice here on the important note, we had already had significant board buy-in from 2019 when we did a PD presentation. And, as we said, we had Peter Landsberger, who was like, don't wait till June, let's do this right away. So that was a huge piece in making this, as seamless as possible. But we really did want to make sure that we did our due diligence of providing the data, providing the precedents, and really showing our college in this proposal that there was a need for this. We had to present with shared governance. So we did need academic senate approval in order to get to the board. And then of course we had to become a part of the board agenda to do an amendment to the board policy. Anything you want to add? I know that's probably an oversimplification, Felisa, who was on the ground doing a lot of this work.
Yeah, I mean, so we started at De Anza doing this, and we had a couple of deans on campus that were kind of our champions for this. And so we have our dean of CTE and then my dean in language arts that just said, yeah, what do you need? Like, what do you need to be able to get this done and submitted? And so our CTE coordinator was really instrumental in helping me kind of think through the language, what it looked like. And we just started trying to present in every shared governance space that we possibly could so that we could get it up to the board. And it was really helpful. And one of the things that happened that was actually very cool is that, Foothill De Anza is a district, but we are very separate schools. We don't have very many policies that happen that are joint. And when we submitted this proposal, we actually submitted it as an FHDA proposal and not just a De Anza proposal. And it was definitely a big deal for us to be able to have this as a consortium-wide proposal, and not just having it live in one of the schools specifically.
So we'll give you a second to read this, or a minute.
Mostly the SB 554 language, but this is now our board policy.
Exactly. This was the amendment added to our pre-existing dual enrollment board policy.
And so the way that our district chose to read this and translate this is it's any student in an adult education program administered by a school district, period. Or any non-credit program administered by a community college district. So that's, that is pursuing a high school diploma or high school equivalency, right? Because SB 554 expands it to say, for students that are working in a high school diploma or high school equivalency, can be considered dual enrolled students. We wanted to really be clear that we wanted this to be something for students in the adult education programs.
I'm just going to pause for a moment and ask if there's any questions. Okay, so yeah, you can access our board document, and I can find the link, but this is it in its entirety. So we don't have the actual proposal because it was just too much and way too college specific, but this is the amended language within our board policy. But yes, I could provide a link, but I'll probably have to find it. I think the board docs that we used isn't as linkable as we would like.
I'm wondering if we could show the board policy though.
Yeah, I could look for it. I'm almost done with this PDF link. Let's see here.
I have a quick question. If I
Sure,
could.
please.
Hi there. I'm Chris Carr. I'm a transition specialist with East Region Adult Education. And we actually have an SB 554 program as well down in San Diego. And one of the things that I'm, I guess, wondering about is you mentioned a lot of, you were able to add, I guess, language to like curriculum or to job descriptions that really emphasized like adult ed students and support for those. Do you offer like specific classes, like counseling classes or things for these students that can address some of those more specific things, perhaps for adult ed students, or is it just kind of, how is that woven in, I guess, to the curriculum?
Yeah, so there's a couple of pieces of it. One is our consortium's relatively small. We have 3 adult schools and just the 2 community colleges. And while we are grateful for that often, one of the things that does happen is we do have a hard time getting a full class set up of adult school students to be saved for them, with the restrictions of like, CAEPs in community college. What we have done to work around that is, and again, these are positions that came out of the work with the consortium, is to be able to take those positions that we have and do as much as we can on the adult school side, right? So some of our adult schools actually have transitions classes. And so we can go in and we bring in, we have another CTE counselor at De Anza. She'll come in and do things like a career interest inventory. We go over majors, we talk about CTE pathways. We do a lot of the work on the adult school side as much as we can to be able to avoid some of that restrictions that happen at the community college side. We are working on a specific, like if we can get enough students to be able to justify like a counseling 5 class that I would be able to teach for them, we could do that. We have the ability to do that. It's just been about the number of students that we can do. And in all fairness, it seems to work out really well for us to have the flexibility of doing these things and being on the site as the community college folks on the adult school sites, because we get to just be really flexible with what it looks like. So that's how we've kind of navigated that piece of it. Yeah, I mean, we definitely are working. We just had conversations even this week about if we were going to try to do a class, what class would it be? How do we do that? We're not done, right? This work is not done. We would love for that to be something that is kind of our next step, to be able to say, yep, here's this adult school class that we're doing. We have done in the past where we had a regular like GE class taught at the adult school site. And we realized that it just wasn't necessarily set up to support students as best as we could. So we had to take it back and reevaluate what that looked like.
Sure.
So this is a work in progress for sure. Go ahead, Janie.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, you know, the pandemic is definitely, like, for most of us, if not all of us, threw a wrench in things, right? And so I will say that the benefit of this side of the work, because we've seen, you know, local colleges in our area as well. Like, I've been talking to Chaffee and West Valley about the different implementations they're doing and non-credit classes and all these things that they're trying. And I'm learning from them, and it's so great. I feel like this is why I give, so I can take, right? But one of the things that helped with us, and this was the same to be said for high school, is during the pandemic, these students were able to just take a one-off class, right? And so because we were offering this to more programs, those students were able to just on their own take an extra class if they're in ESL, or take an extra class if they're in CTE, for example, medical terminology, you know, like things like that. We have a lot of crossover. So having the special admit option alone was really helpful. And one of the things that our district, or excuse me, our consortium has done really well together, and we'll get into kind of the process as well, is that we don't limit our students. Now, you might find, and we recommend as adult school partners and even community college partners, when you go into your community college districts within your consortium, when you go into their dual enrollment kind of parameters, that you really be vocal about how that works or doesn't work for adult school students, because we were lucky in that both of our colleges don't really put a lot of restraint on what students can take, because we didn't want to pigeonhole, for example, ESL students into taking ESL classes.
Well,
we know,
So yeah, I mean, I think we're going to get to this, but
okay.
Our special admit process for the high schools does in fact have classes that are restricted. So students, there are some classes that they can't take if they're a high school student. When we were intentional about implementing what that looked like on the community college side for the adult school special admits, we wanted to be intentional about not having that. So what we did to implement it was, we said, okay, we're going to start with CAEP funded programs, right? It was a way for us to kind of manage who was coming in, how we were supporting them, right? The kind of spirit of all of this was to support students in our CAEP funded programs anyway. So we internally said, okay, CAEP funded programs can be adult school special admits. And we lifted all of the restrictions for courses that students could take. And that is one of the only differences between our high school special admit and dual enrollment process and our adult school process. The only other one is that we took off, you know, like the parent signature, and we were kind of intentional about that piece. But
like
that was
you said,
a big one.
we have more presentations.
Yeah, but we've got some questions. So should we try to see if we can?
Yeah, I wanted to acknowledge.
Thank you so much.
Both of them. So let's just acknowledge the order. Wendy, I would say as of right now in the work that we've accomplished, our Ed Code has actually helped us, right?
Yeah.
As we've cited before, California Ed Code really did put it in our district's hands to be able to expand this dual enrollment opportunity. And you know, that probably can hinder folks as well. That might be something that you might battle against a little in terms of district. And so that's why we really try to give you strategies as well that got us to that point. And then for Brett's question, excellent question. Are these one-off classes that students take through dual enrollment, especially adult school students, applied to their high school diploma requirements? Absolutely. It will obviously go by the high school districts that houses that adult school's requirements. But yes, we have seen students kind of simultaneously take college credit classes that are going to give them, you know, a leg up in their college career, but also is going back into their high school studies, or even helping them prepare for GED studies. So we see students use those in that way as well. And so quickly, because I did bring it up and I was right, I cannot link it to you guys. That's just how this thing works. But here's our board policy. Can you see that where it says at the top, board policy chapter 5?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is just our searchable board docs that we use. This policy, or excuse me, policy amendment, it exists within admissions and concurrent enrollment. So like I said earlier, this was already board policy that our district had for providing concurrent enrollment, which is another term that gets often, kind of swapped for dual enrollment. And the portion, let me see if I can make it a little bigger for y'all, because I know this is some small writing. The portion that we referred to earlier, and it's funny because it's literally a sentence, right? A lot of work to get this sentence, but it's an amazing sentence. And that's the portion that we had on the slides for you just a moment ago. So it really, looks simple, but as we've described, there's a lot of work that goes into it. Okay.
Yeah, Janie, we can copy and paste that link and put it in.
I tried. I copied and pasted it for myself to see if, and this is what came up. So I'll copy and paste this, but you're still going to have to go in here to BP 5100, I think it is, or 5010. So you have to still go. Oh no, that's AP. Where's BP 5010? Yeah, so I'll do that, but this is the link you come to. And so you're going to have to kind of just click on it yourself. So it's BP 5010, and here's that link. Yeah, I tried it out for you guys. Sorry. That's the best I think board docs is going to be able to do.
And then we have a question about, is there a slide with exact definition of special part-time student with an outline of the enrollment process? I don't know that we have one in this presentation. I mean, like I mentioned before, we definitely still have work to do. So like if you go on to our websites, that process is laid out really well for our high school students. It is not available yet on our websites for the adult school students. There are still some battles for us to fight. But they parallel in terms of the processes. So we can probably continue on with our presentation.
Yeah, that actually is a great lead into our next slides. And that's really the transition process to community college and delineating all of that, right? So Felisa had mentioned earlier that another way that this work is something that we're so proud of, but also why it's like pretty unprecedented for our district, is we had a lot of collaboration. And, I give credit to Felisa and myself. I really do, because we're both not too scared to be pushy. And so we were like, hey, we need to be at the table. We just want to help. We just want to collaborate, but we have the adult school, experience. We want to be able to help you guys out on this. And that was instrumental in bringing our deans together. So from each college, our deans of admissions and records came together to make sure we knew what the process was, from application to banner to coding, to make sure students aren't charged, all of that. And so working together and making it one process really helped. We were also able to address, we being Felisa and myself, were able to address the community college questions, right? Like, what were the concerns? For example, we operate on apportionment, and we operate on funding from student enrollment and student tuition. And we wanted to, as a community college, we wanted to make sure we're setting parameters. At what point, are we just going to keep accepting students in the adult school dual enrollment and giving them 11 units or less at a time of free money, or free college? And the reason I didn't mind that concern is because one of the things that we've done in the past as a K through 12 system is we have taken students who are often represent the population we see in adult school, and we've given them classes that are not meaningful or helpful for their future. And so we also agreed with that and saying, yes, we need to be careful about the academic plan that we're providing for students. We want them to take as many classes as they can for free, because it's an amazing, barrier crusher for most students. But we also want to make sure that we're not doing them a disservice. As adults, we're not getting any younger, right? And we want to make sure that students are set up and on a track that our, educational expertise can foster. And so that is just an example of one of the community college questions or concerns that we were able to address and support from an adult school lens, which is another reason having adult school representation or people with adult school experience is so important to have them at the table. So we did end up creating a special admit form. We were at the time that this was happening in the process of, or we're already just past the process of making our high school dual enrollment admit forms electronic, because so much had changed with the pandemic. It really pushed us to use a lot of virtual, document type of strategies. And so we decided, because we knew our population was so small, that we would start with a fillable PDF, and we'll share that with you in a moment. Again, we agreed upon the process of making sure we know from application to class enrollment, what that was going to look like, which included this form, which included verification, who verifies if a student from an adult school in California outside of our consortium is coming. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. And then, of course, we wanted to make sure that the professional development and training was supportive for our adult school transition staff as well. We wanted to make sure they knew which steps to walk through for the students and which things to highlight, which we'll talk about more when we look at the form. Anything to add?
Yeah, so that's a really important point. Not only does our dual enrollment policy include all CAEP funded programs, but it's any school from any adult school. We're not having students coming in just from our consortium. We've expanded to other consortiums in terms of this is anybody at an adult school that is in a CAEP funded program. And that was actually really important to us. Like, obviously we're working on starting with working out all of the kinks that happen with our consortium, but students from any adult school can in fact come and be a dual enrolled student with us.
Excellent. So I'm just kind of checking the chat. Thanks again, Rachel. Appreciate it.
Yes.
If anything in education, we know it takes a village. So I appreciate your help. So let's look at our special admit form. I don't know why I'm making myself say this, but it's not the most amazing form in the world, but it was such a beautiful start, and it definitely, as we grow our program, will get improved. Let's see here. We do have a question in the chat. No worries, Rebecca. We talk fast, and then we got a lot of information to give you. So let's see here. Would all students enrolled in adult ed be a candidate for dual?
Yeah, so it's just CAEP funded programs. So there's the 7 CAEP funded, we just looked these up yesterday too, the 7 CAEP funded programs that exist in the adult school world. So it includes adults with disabilities, CTE, ESL, ASE, so high school diploma and high school equivalency, but it's any of those 7 programs. Janae, I can't think of what the other ones are. We just did this the other day too.
Parent ed. You said adults with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there was one that we didn't count at all. Like we had forgotten. Darn it, my brain is not. Let's see, 1, 2. I'm typing them in the chat. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, the last one. There was one that we were like, oh, we didn't think about that. Okay, I'm gonna put 6 in the chat that I've successfully gotten. The 7th one we didn't really have
in our consortium. We don't have a lot.
Was it like part-time or full-time or something like that, or something special CTE?
I'll find it. Let's keep going. You want to show the form? I'll look it up.
Yeah, thank you. So let's see here. Yes, our ESL students would. So basically anything that's either completely or partially CAEP funded is what we ended up deciding on as a district. So just to repeat, because in case anybody else missed it as well, our board language now, our board policy language does say essentially any adult school student, but we wanted to focus on adult school students who are coming out of CAEP funded programs, because that's who we really see this work being the highest need for. Students who are taking a one-off class at the adult school don't necessarily have that same need. Let's see here. ESL counts, yes. So again, Anne, thank you for putting up this clarification. Let me stop sharing so I can go back real quick. See, this is what we say about questions, please, because we can talk about this for years. We want to make sure you guys are walking out of this with the information you need. So SB 554 does state that dual enrollment automatically for community college should be given to students from the adult education system that are in high school diploma or GED programs. But also within SB 554 language is this reference to Ed Code. This is California Education Code that states the governing board of a community college district is the determining factor of who a special admit is, right? So even though the state is, strongly requiring community colleges to acknowledge adult school students for dual enrollment who are in high school diploma and GED programs, it is up to a district if they would like to extend that to anyone else, like any kind of special admit. And what we ended up, really going to battle for, and let me oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry if I'm going to give you a little bit of vertigo here. But then what we ended up doing is working the community college system, because this was a district community college decision, to add this amendment to our current board policy for dual enrollment. And that is that any student in an adult education program administered by a school district or non-credit program administered by a community college district that is pursuing a high school diploma or high school equivalency certificate and what have you, like that looks like it's still only saying high school diploma, but that is a combination now of the wording that comes from our actual SB 554 legislation through California, but also the wording that we wanted. And that is really any adult school program. And so what we've decided as a consortium is that we will really offer this dual enrollment opportunity to students who come from any CAEP funded program area. And Felisa listed them in the chat.
Yeah, I think the other piece of this that's important to remember is that we started this process about the special admit dual enrollment before SB 554. So we created kind of the language we wanted to have before that. And then SB 554 came in and it was kind of like, see, there's a reason that we're doing this. Like this is legitimacy to why we're doing these things. And so it gave us that extra push, but we started this before that. So we didn't have this idea that it had to be high school diploma or GED or high school equivalency. Like we just knew we wanted this to be a thing that adult school students got to benefit from. So our entire proposal was based on just the idea that adult school students should also be able to be special admins, right? One of the things that's really frustrating is that you have students that are trying to transition, they're trying to go to community college, but they don't have a high school diploma or GED or whatever the case is. So they don't qualify for a lot of the financial aid pieces and they get stuck in this weird gray area. We just knew we wanted to get rid of that barrier.
And we actually are going to share a real life student example with you today on where, you know, this really plays a role. And I especially encourage y'all to stay for that if you can. I was going to say community college folks, but quite frankly, it's so beneficial, I think, for both adult school and community college side to see within this one student how many barriers she endured and ran across before we were able to use all of the things in our power to help her be successful. So we'll get to that for sure. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share again for our form and just go over it briefly. So this is what our special admit form looks like currently. It's a PDF fillable form. These are screenshots taken. Again, huge for us, unless you know our district, maybe it's not like such a big deal, but the fact that Foothill College and De Anza College labels or logos, excuse me, are both on the top of this form is pretty amazing. So we actually looked at the high school special admit form that was being used prior to when things went all digital. And we really adopted a lot of the language and everything that was in there and kind of did a hybrid of both De Anza and Foothill's forms, because the high school admit forms that we were, you know, coming off of were actually different, right? Not dramatically so, but it goes to show you that our colleges didn't necessarily consult each other in other dual enrollment matters before. And so really it's just some basic information here about, you know, we just changed in the state from 11.5 units to 11 units is the maximum that students can take through dual enrollment, both high school and adult school. Students are able, or 6 in the summer, excuse me, students are able to petition to take more credits, but then they would have to pay for their credits in the entirety. So, you know, we don't encourage students to do that unless they absolutely want to. And what we end up seeing is that more high school students are interested in that than adult school students. And then, of course, you know, we acknowledge the California law that limits how much PE can be taken. And that is something that carries from the high school dual enrollment to adult school, because it's so similar within the K through 12 ed code. So, you know, they fill out which college they're going to, which term. We do stipulate in here in the beginning that you are able to take classes at both De Anza and Foothill. We always want to make sure that students are able to take classes where they are most needed or whatever fits for them. But we do make sure they know that with the special admit process, it is a total of 11 units. It's not 11 units at each institution. So then, students are able to put in their classes. One of the lessons we learned in terms of classes is, it's really a trial and error. We had students listing specific course registration numbers, and then that class would fill up. So we ended up having to redo forms and things like that. So now we found that it's helpful for a student to tell us the title of the class that they're interested in on this form. So that way it applies to whatever section is open by the time they're ready for registration. So this is the next part of the form. I kind of blew it up. It's only a one-page form. And I really want to highlight here the student agreement. This was a huge training piece for our adult school transition staff, because we wanted to make sure that students understood the level of importance or severity in terms of their education that they were getting into. We don't want students set up for failure. We believe wholeheartedly that you cannot look at a student or look at their records and know whether or not they'll be successful in college. But we do want them to know that there are certain parameters when you're going to college. We need them to know that just because you're taking a free class doesn't mean this, is not going to be on your permanent record for your college transcript. We want them to know that they're not going to be able to miss their, adult school class in order to attend a community college class, that it really shows them the, for lack of a better term, contract that they're getting into, even though they're bypassing some of the things like tuition. So that was important for us to be able to have a student walked through this agreement by their transition staff before they signed, and then before their transition advisor signed. So that was another important piece for us on this form. We didn't want to be gatekeepers to our students by requiring an administrator signature when we know how much a transition counselor or advisor at the adult school campus works with students. And like I loosely mentioned earlier, we require an academic plan for students to participate in this program. So that's part of the steps. And that is a transition advisor or counselor on the adult school campus will create an academic plan with them to help inform what classes they're going to take. And so that's why another reason why we wanted a transition advisor signature alone to be able to give proof of permission. Another cool thing that we did is, a big part of the CAEP process is making things as systematic as possible. And so while myself and Felisa were the ones who kind of volunteered for the moment to be the ones who collect these forms and verify the forms and things like that, we wanted to create email addresses that people could access other than us. Because if we go somewhere, whether it's vacation or permanently, we didn't want to take this progress with us. And so that was another thing that we did. We created an FH-adult schools at fhda.edu and a DA-adult schools. And so this actually goes to our respective colleges, and we're able to, within my outreach department and within Felisa's counseling department, we're able to process the forms. So last but not least on the form, this is the second page, technically third page, because we have a De Anza checklist and a Foothill checklist. And this is just helpful information that was already provided to our high school students who are doing the special admit dual enrollment. And we wanted to make sure it was there for them as well. So these are just some helpful steps on how to onboard to our colleges for students who access this form without any guidance, like especially somebody coming from a consortium, or an adult school outside of our consortium. We wanted them to have instructions on how to process this.
Sorry, so there's a bunch of things happening in chat. I just want to be able to go back and talk about them really quickly. We can share this form in chat for the dual enrollment. The only thing is that we modeled it after our own internal high school dual enrollment. So I would suggest that if folks are trying to create something like that, to be able to take what is already there, not reinvent the wheel at your college or in your consortium. But we would be happy to share it with this one. There's a couple of questions about what students are eligible for. So they do have to go through the regular admissions process. Our transitions counselors at the adult schools help them fill out all of the application stuff. If they need help, they reach out to us. The matriculation piece does have to happen. And then when they are enrolled, this form gets filled out and sent to us to make sure that we have everything complete and we send it in. So that was a thing that came up in here. So one of the things that we really wanted to make sure dual enrollment happened was that College Promise is now a thing at a lot of community colleges, 2 years of free tuition. And so if students were taking classes while they were in the adult school before dual enrollment that stopped them from being eligible as a first-time college student. So they were no longer eligible for college promise. And we wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. So students don't actually need to pay fees. Their fees are waived entirely as a dual enrolled student, except for some course materials. And then when that has come up, the adult schools have tried to see if they could fund some of those course materials for that student and scholarship them. We do have the option of letting students pay for some of the student fees because that allows them to have access to things like the VTA passes, the healthcare, so they can in fact opt into them, but they do not need to. And that's part of that process of working with them really closely one-on-one to make sure that their students and the transition counselors and us are working together to say, okay, this is what the student needs. This is in their best interest.
I'm going to go ahead and answer Annabelle's question. Is this application in addition to the CCC apply? Yes, it is. So the special admit form, whether we're using it for high school students or for adult school students, is definitely just a portion of being able to get them permission. So they still have to apply, and our colleges do use CCC apply to our school. We have given our transition staff at the adult schools the training that when a student actually fills out the open CCC apply application, that they select their education status as currently enrolled in an adult school. However, unfortunately, that does not trigger anything inside of Banner. So we use Banner for our student records. And one thing that we have to do through our admission and records department is once these students forms have been approved, we have to go in there and manually do the coding to make sure that they're not charged for any classes and make sure that they're not allowed to enroll past 11 units. So that's one piece of what we're still having to do manually. However, you'll see later on in a slide that we have some promises from our state regarding open CCC apply. We just haven't had anything implemented yet.
So there's one other question from Annabelle. It says, why have adult schools sign off as a recommendation instead of just confirming attendance at the adult school? They are adults. We found that there were students that were signing up for community college classes and not understanding that started their college transcript, and that these were classes that they then, if they were planning on transferring, were going to stay with them. And so we really wanted to make sure that students understood that we can do a continuation of goals from the adult schools into the community college. So part of that is also then signing off and understanding like this can be transferred back for your high school diploma, right? In our district, in our consortium at least, students can take a community college class, have those units double back to their high school diploma if they're working on that. And so that would be another conversation. So we put it in as an intentional space to communicate and support students in that transition to make sure that we are helping them navigate an often very foreign education system.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, even students who, are familiar with the K through 12 US education system, we still are working toward improving our colleges away from this cafeteria model that our college system for so long has offered to students. And so essentially the cafeteria model for me is a good metaphor as to why this level of guidance is needed, because a student easily gets overwhelmed with the choices. And we want to make sure that we're not gatekeeping for one, but also that we're offering the guidance for students to be successful. I was a first-time college student in my family, or first-generation college student. And I remember going back to counselors too late and things like that, and how many extra classes I took that didn't apply and all these things. So there's a level of just, making sure that a student isn't too shy or going to talk themselves out of getting our support. So if we offer just a little bit of this bureaucracy, for lack of a better word, in a supportive way, we find that it does help the student to succeed. Let's see here. It does, they are recording. And so I believe it was said in the beginning of our presentation, logistics wise, that it will be available through the website for our presentation recording. Let's see here. Okay, good. So I had a couple of those. The recording will be available. Oh, thank you for answering. The recording will be available on VFairs for the next 60 days. So
also, just so that people understand, it looks like Janae was going to raise her hand as well. But one of the things that Janie and I feel really strongly about, and we've done this for a lot of other consortiums, is if you guys have questions and we're talking too fast or it's too much information, just contact us and we'll sit and meet with you and talk to you about the process and talk to you about how we got things done. We're happy to talk to community college staff that you guys might be coming up against some roadblocks, like whatever we can do to support, right? I hope this comes off in spaces when we're talking, but like, this is something we're very passionate about. We really care about this. We really believe in the work that we're doing. So if we can help other people do that, reach out and we're happy to do that. So yeah, Janae, did you have a question or were you going to add?
Sorry, going down to unmute. Well, first of all, can I put your guys' email in the chats?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay,
absolutely.
So I'm posting that right now. And then
it's also in the slide deck for those who are able to grab the slide deck from the chat.
And then also there was a question above about financial aid. And so I wasn't sure if the person who was asking that was asking if the student can also apply for FAFSA at the same time, or if that's necessary, and maybe if they can the FAFSA cover like the books? And then another, just my question is, let's just say that this is a dual enrollment into a CTE course. Can colleges use their strong workforce funds to maybe set up some sort of way to help students pay for books?
Yeah, I mean, the answer would be yes, they could. We don't. We haven't done that yet, but it doesn't mean we can't talk about it. In fact, our dean of CTE was the one who was the champion to help us get this proposal done to begin with. So there's definitely, again, like growth that needs to still happen. Most of, at least in our district, most of our courses are moving towards a zero cost course in general. And so that's a piece of it. Students do not qualify for financial aid through FAFSA until they have a high school diploma or GED. And so this is a way for them to be able to kind of double dip and get their feet wet before they then are qualifying for financial aid or DREAM Act. And so that is another reason why we felt this was so important, right? Students got to experience what it means to be a college student. And it's so important for our students, right, to understand that they have this narrative that they don't belong in college. What better way to start this warm transition when they're still in the safety of the adult schools where they know where they're at, they feel comfortable, their friends are there. And then you help them kind of understand, like, look, you are taking college class, like you are a college student. And that has been really instrumental in getting students to the community college.
So I want to go back to Rebecca's question real quick because it was an excellent one. It says in the chat, for the student to take classes at community college in the summer, do they also need to be actively taking summer classes at the adult school? No, we wanted to honor summer enrollment. And again, it does change. State requirements say that during summer, students can only take up to 6 units. And this is quarter system units. I should be, or is that the same for semester? I don't actually know. I shouldn't have said that. So anyways, we honor the students' spring enrollment at the adult school for summer dual enrollment through our community colleges. So if they're not in a summer class during the adult school, which honestly, in some of our cases, like GED, for example, isn't always offered during the summer. So we absolutely want to give students an opportunity during the summer. And we think it's a great way for students who are matriculating as well to get an introduction to Foothill or De Anza or community college before they start attending as a full-time student. And then I'm going to probably pass that De Anza question from Wendy to Felisa, but I can tell you that your question about, what students, out of curiosity, what adult ed students are transitioning to is a great reason that data is so important, and having our data dashboard that we've created for our consortium, especially for our adult school students, has been so helpful in acknowledging to us those students who go beyond us, right? They go around us and they don't necessarily get involved in this process. It's nice to know what they're signing up for. For example, one of the biggest data revelations has been that students are even just going for, like math improvement, like just trying to get some of their basic math skills. And those are things that we wouldn't have necessarily guessed because we didn't know all the data before. But I don't know, can you answer that, Felisa, about the manufacturing program?
Yeah, I mean, it is a great program. We do have some students that go into it. We have a lot of students that go into auto tech, and we have a lot of students that go into general education courses. If they're a high school diploma student, they're taking classes to bring back to their high school diploma. If they're ESL, they're taking a lot of our ESL courses. It really just depends, right? I mean, we know that our adult school students are coming from all over the place. They take then whatever class makes sense for them. Did we miss any of the other questions?
Do you work with any youth apprentice? Well, hold on. Melissa might have had. Okay, no. So the question is, do you work with any youth apprenticeships? We don't specifically. We have partners though within our consortium that do work with like that. So Nova, for example, does work with that population of like 18 or 19-year-olds to 23-year-olds, which is a very high risk population for our state, and have a lot of students without a high school diploma or GED. So we work with them in terms of providing transition support and things like that, but not in the sense of apprenticeships. Foothill College does have a great apprenticeship program. And so I often will give students information about that and try to get them involved. But with those, the tricky thing about being able to just use the dual enrollment as a standalone is that you usually have to be involved in an apprenticeship with an outside source, right? And so what we can do is offer students classes that might prepare them to getting there. But so far we haven't made any connection with the youth apprenticeships. Let's see here. Okay, so Annabelle, that's a great question that kind of leads us into our real life example. So let's give you a really great example of how this system as we have it in our districts, because again, we want to emphasize the fact that we have not done everything, right? This is just the one thing that we're seeing a lot of success in, and that's why we share it with you all, but there's so much more to be done, and we're still working all the time to try to make more pathways and help students out on a more systematic level. But specifically for the context of this presentation, let's talk about Diana. Can you see my screen? My presentation slide? Okay. So Diana is a student who recently came to me. She is South American born. She's only actually been in this country for less than a year. And she almost automatically or immediately when she came to our Bay Area, attended Mountain View Los Altos Adult School. So by the time I had met her, she was just one test away from completing her GED and, had it scheduled for the next month. And so it was basically a guarantee that she was going to have completed her GED. And she was extremely interested in our radiologic technology program at Foothill College. So thankfully, she got my information, got on my radar, and we really worked with her going through the standard onboarding steps of finding out what she needs to be a radiologic technology student, which in our college, Foothill, is offered as like a cohort model. So I told her, you want to see a counselor, you want to figure out prerequisites, all of those good things. So it has to start with a free application. So that's where she started. She successfully did that. Somebody asked earlier if students have to use a social security number. No, they do not. Even for, this special admit program, we don't do any different mandates on students than our state does. And so no, students absolutely do not need to provide any kind of documentation. If it's not required by the state, for example, visas and things like that. So she applied, definitely got flagged as a student who would have to pay out-of-state tuition because she did not have documentation to provide, such as a social security number or a tax ID. She took a placement test because she wanted to see where she fell in line with some of the prerequisites that radiologic technology required, and she placed in English 1A. So again, this is a student who's only been in our country for less than a year. Most of it has been in the GED program, but she had such a strong English language background from her country of origin that she was ready for college level English 1A. Boom. That's something a lot of people in education, especially community colleges, might never assume or think of an adult school student, especially one who's just moved to this country. So she was ready for college level English. She met with her counselor. We do an academic plan through Degree Works, and she got her plan for her prerequisites. In fall, that was to take English 1A, math, and medical terminology, a total of 14 units. In winter, it was for her to take chemistry, communications, and health, which was also a total of 14 units. Well, this became an immediate issue because in order to pay for these classes, she would need to qualify for AB 540 because, as I'm sure many of you know, the state tuition price is about $32 per unit, and the out-of-state tuition price is about $200 per unit. So that immediately was where this program, this special admit program, came into play. I told her, okay, we're going to get you into some kind of program to where we can offer you up to 11 units for free. So she was done with MVLA Adult School. She had completed her GED. I could not count that as being currently enrolled in an adult school. but she was interested in the medical field. So we went to Fremont Union High School District's adult school within our consortium, and we got her into the medical terminology class. They even were as gracious enough to offer her a scholarship for the medical terminology class. But we didn't just stop there. They actually, at Fremont Union Adult School, have a certificate that is for medical translation. It involves 2 levels of medical terminology class and 1 medical translation class. And she's actually going for the certificate because it would be a great opportunity for her to work part-time while she's going to radiologic technology full-time for Foothill. So it became a great pathway for her, but it also opened up dual enrollment through the special admit. However, that's another barrier. Like I said, each quarter for her academic plan here, fall and winter, she was set to take 14 units according to her counselor. But in our state, we're only offered 11 units maximum for each quarter for a student in dual enrollment. So what we ended up doing is, again, that's why we selected medical terminology. She no longer has to take this class at Foothill College. She's able to use her medical terminology studies from the adult school. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work on this portion. What we're going to try to figure out how we can help her to accommodate these classes by either qualifying for AB 540 status or for seeing which class that she can get away with not taking as a prerequisite. And that's something I'm working on with her counselor. So again, let's see here. We see here that this student just hit barrier after barrier after barrier. And this is a great example of the population that we work with. Now, to answer, I forget whose question it was about what kind of population of students that we get, as most of, if not all of our adult school people in here know, they're all over the spectrum, right? We have people who are changing careers and already have a great deal of education under their belt, whether it's in another country or in this country. We have students who are following their own pathway within the adult school of, let's say, ESL to GED and then to community college. Like, we really have all of these different students, but what we've noticed is that this, dual enrollment process, or some of the pathways that we're working on creating, really does cast a wide net. I'm not going to say wide enough because it's never enough, but a wide net to support the varying populations that we have in adults.
Yeah. So Christopher just asked a really important question that I wanted to bring up. So AB 540 has now been expanded to qualification for students in adult schools and community college. And so this actually does help students qualify for AB 540, right? We've actually done this a lot. We work with students and we say, okay, here's the calculation of how many hours we need to have in a combination of adult schools, community college, high school in California. And so we can, in fact, get students qualified this way, right? Like at our district, we have a 6 units or less fees that get waived for in-state tuition for AB 540 students. And that was actually really important for us. And if we can get them enrolled in an adult school, they actually then get to take up to 11 and have their fees waived instead of just sticking with 6. And so it gets them to AB 540 faster if we can be creative and we work collectively as a consortium to make sure that we get them enrolled is in whatever they need to at the adult school and the community college to start that timeline and to get them their AB 540 status as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Great question. So we do have a couple more slides, but please, we got another, 15 minutes or so together. Please feel free to keep asking questions. Wait, I thought it was till 10, no? Was 90 minutes?
Okay. Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay. But also, like we said earlier, if other questions come up or if you want to reach out to us, you're definitely invited to do that. So the last piece is kind of, and we've touched a lot upon this just with your great questions, and that is, where do we go from here? So as I've mentioned before, as our population grows, we want to, move this process as aligned to our high school dual enrollment process as possible. This includes doing like an Adobe form, things like that. There's a lot of automated systeming there within Adobe form of like who the emails get sent to, where the form goes, to make things just even more streamlined for our students, because that's always the goal, is making the college experience as easy as possible for all students. Again, as I mentioned, the state chancellor's office did put out a memo on 8/19 that they are working with OpenCCC to create fields or triggers for dually enrolled adult school students. It's been a little while since then, as we can see, but this is all the more reason for the visibility that we continue as a CAEP family that we continue to get for adult school students. And that pressure within that visibility is what gets these systematic changes. Oops, see, my magic mouse is just too magical. Supplemental questions. This is a key piece of something that we're actually in the midst of right now. And that is within OpenCCC Apply, even though the application is really standard and we don't have a lot of control over it. As a college, we have worked with our colleges to add a supplemental question for adult school students, which asks them if they have ever attended an adult school, yes or no. This would trigger an automatic email that welcomes them, but also gives them a survey to give us more information about what adult school experience they've had. So we're able to kind of have them on our radar and be able to make sure that they're getting the support they need. That's an addition to what we already do data wise on tracking students. By putting this in the onboarding process, it ensures that we're going to catch them a little sooner, especially for students who don't go through the transition process we've established within our consortium. Dual enrollment cohorts, we've mentioned this a lot. Felisa mentioned in the chat that we are really focusing on building our pathways and creating cohort opportunities, especially with parent ed in the moment. That's what we're talking about. And MOUs are always important. Again, that just really solidifies the systematic process that happens between two very different institutions, being K-12 / adult school, as well as the community colleges. And then outreach and workshops, which is part of what we're doing here in terms of giving, but we're also continuing to learn as much as we can and develop as professionally as we can for this, because the system is ever changing and we want to make sure that we are learning ourselves how to best support adult school students on both sides. And that includes making sure that the rest of our constituency on the adult school and the community college side is trained and knowledgeable or aware of the things that we're doing, because not everybody, I still get people, I've been on my campus for almost 2 years now, and I still get people who are like, what's adult school? Who do you support? What are you talking about? Wait, you're in this? I have a whole inbox file in my email of requests, because as soon as people find out I know adult school population, they're like, come, I have ideas. Like, it's really cool. So I'll leave it to Felisa or Janae if you want to add anything, but in the meantime, I do have our contact information up here. We'll take any other questions until our time ends today, but yes, Janae, please.
I just wanted to make an announcement to the group. I am unable to save the chat, and so I reached out to Renee, and she said that she would make a copy of it for me and send it to me, and hopefully that we'll be able to get that to be posted to the VFairs platform, along with where our agendas are, where the presentations will be. So I don't know if anyone else in the group can save their chat, but some of us are unable to. So just in case you can't, we are going to be saving it in a different way and hopefully being able to get that out to everybody.
No problem. I appreciate all of that the team has been doing, though, the VFairs team, because we have definitely experienced some not so pleasant moments within this Zoom virtual existence. So we appreciate the security, and thank you everybody for being understanding while we work around those little factors. And to everybody saying thank you in the chat, you're absolutely welcome. I've had the privilege and honor to work with Felisa, especially, but now Janae, but Felisa especially for the last, 8-9 years or so. And her passion only fuels my passion. So this is work that, she's been a great partner and champion in, and we're so honored to be here to be able to share. And like I said, we are always willing to have people share with us as well. We're all just doing the best we can, and where we have a strength, someone else might have a strength. And so, that's the goal here today, is to share what we've learned through a lot of hard work. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Yes, please give us a 5-star Yelp rating. Any other questions? I'm going to keep our information up here just so everybody has a chance to get it. But if there's no other questions, please feel free to, take a bio or coffee break before your next workshop.
Yeah, we'll hang out for the next 10 minutes if anything comes up.
I'll keep this up, the contact info up just a little bit longer, and then I'll close it out.
Thank you so much, Felisa and Janie. It was so many kudos in the comments. That's kind of
I
a fun,
know, this
a
is
fun way to
making my
finish.
day.
Hey, good morning, guys. I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you mentioned earlier that your A&R goes through and manually eliminates fees. Is that
Yes.
something you guys put in your governance board, or did you just get A&R on board with that? Because that's kind of one of the roadblocks that I face.
Yeah, so we would love for it to actually be something that is a little bit more systematic, but as of right now, because I mean, we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students. So as of right now, we are doing it all manually, and they just got on board with it. It was like they said, "What do you guys need from us in order to do this?" And well, that's not totally fair. To begin with, they were trying to figure out how to do it without us. The board policy came down. They then were trying to figure out how they were going to implement it. They had questions like, what is CAEP funding? And so Janie and I then found out that they were doing this work without us. And we kind of just inserted ourselves into these meetings and said like, hey, we can help you do this. It's actually our job to help you do this. So the reason that they're allowing us to do this and to have it be manual is that they come to us directly. So either Janie at Foothill or me at De Anza, and we make sure that the form is filled out correctly, and then they get coded manually in Banner on the back end. So all of those things like having CCC apply updated, right, and have it to include adult schools, like all of that will then happen much more automatically at some point. But as of right now, they have let us do this.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, we've said it a couple of times as well, in that really looking at your community colleges and how they implement dual enrollment for high school students is helpful, even if it's only for knowledge of what you have to fight. But for us, it's been really helpful in the sense that that's what we ended up doing. We ended up coding them very similarly to the way that we code our high school special admit dual enrollment students. And so we were able to just use that model, but add an additional code in Banner. And the fact that our colleges are doing it the same way is just, yay.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a unique world. I kind of similar to you ladies. I oversee dual enrollment and I oversee adult ed for the college. So I do all of the CAP agreements, and so we're super CCAP heavy, and it's really that matter of trying to figure out how we can fit the adult ed students in. And typically they don't have enough classes to warrant like a CCAP class. So like, how do we get those like solo students in to do dual enrollment? And I run across the issue of if we don't create shadow sections and like the students get tacked on fees, and our A&R department won't really go in and just waive the fees. So I'm trying to work around all of those issues at the moment.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's been a thing that we've had to kind of navigate. And unfortunately, you know, each college is different, but there are ways to look at, you know, what you can control. And for example, you may not be able to close out legally, you legally cannot close out a class for, you know, 10 students or what have you, but you are able to set the parameters of what the max enrollment is. And you are able to kind of negotiate those factors if your college is comfortable with that, to essentially, you know, smoothen the transition or leave a door slightly cracked for an adult school population if it's not as large as what you need to fill a whole class. And then also, I think kind of navigating the classes that you choose, that's where it becomes really important. You might want to check out West Valley. I'm pretty sure they have modeled after Chafee, but I could be wrong with that. But West Valley has a continuing education department. That's essentially what you're doing, Christian, like they do dual enrollment and they do adult ed populations within this continuing education. And they just put out a series of kind of introductory classes that introduce students to different programs, right? So like accounting is an option. I think parenting ed was an option. And so that's an interesting way of looking at it too, right? As providing like a handful of classes that that already exist that you're hoping adult school students will take part in through dual enrollment. The other thing that they're doing, which was nice, and this is not really anything to do with your question, I just thought it was cool, is they found a way for non-credit students to do an embedded application on their website to bypass OpenCCC. I'm actually looking at how I can possibly adopt that because, for example, our non-credit ESL students really, really struggle with our application. And honestly, all students do, but especially our students with
CCC
language.
apply is awful.
Exactly. Students with language barriers, but honestly, it's not the language barrier. What it is that Open CCC or CCC Apply, it really is created for one kind of student. And as we know, adult school students, especially adult school students from other countries, just do not fall into that. And it can be a very hard process. So that's something I'm looking into as well. So it goes to show that we're giving so we can take back as well, because other colleges are doing some great things.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, you have our information. So if you want to contact or anything, feel free to just send me an email and I'll connect you. Any other questions? We got about 4 more minutes here. I feel like you guys are like my adult school students where I'm going to have to close the session in order for you to go do something else. And we're happy to do that early if it helps you to go get some coffee or just take a stretch before your next workshop. Oh, thank you, Sarah. It's a lot of information as well. So don't beat yourselves up if you don't remember everything. 2 very fast speaking women said today. And we live, eat, breathe, sweat, all of those things, this information and this work. So there's a lot. Yes, please, Dr. Jesus.
Yes, I'm not sure if you can see me now.
I cannot, but we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, we're happy to just talk to the screen.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to click, but for some reason my camera is not on.
It's okay.
But nonetheless, I want to just thank you. You know, we have a partnership with our local community college, and this piece that you've given, you know, brings in new ideas. The partnership that we have with our community college is that we do create a cohort of students, and we put them in you could say in a program. But that's after they've completed their high school diploma or GED.
Right.
And we have a pathway for them to complete their general education courses at the community college. But I've always questioned that it just takes too much time. They have to first they have to do their high school diploma. And then sometimes it's kind of demoralizing to think it's going to take me another 2 more years to do this. I mean, it's worked so far. I mean, we just started it the last 2 years and the pandemic didn't help.
Yeah.
But this year we're up and running. But I think with your ideas that you introduced today would be even better. If we can identify the students early on when they can do concurrent enrollment, not only will they be able to finish their high school diploma, but they can start their community college coursework at the same time, which is something, it's like a piece that we were missing. So again, I just want to thank you for this session. It really, I'm kind of excited. I'm very excited, by the way.
Yay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Janie.
I was just going to say, you know, and that's what we alluded to a couple of times, and that's precedence. And I don't know if all community colleges are the same because, you know, I'm new to the higher ed world, but, you know, middle college has been an opportunity for students to really do what you're talking about. And that is, you know, create their college identity while doing kind of 2 things. What that's getting college credits, but also getting enough credits to graduate high school. And so if that's helpful in your community college districts or district partnership to be like, well, hey, look what we do for high school students. This is not that different, you know? And so I'm hoping that precedence or that argument, for lack of a better word, will help you to build off of that model if it's helpful.
No, thank you, definitely.
Felisa, were you going to add something?
I was just going to say, if your adult school is housed in a K-12 district, the district has a policy already about how they take back college credits. Some people double them. Some people, Santa Clara, I think actually more than doubles. It just depends. Yeah. So your district should actually already have a policy if you're housed in a K-12 district. About how you can transfer those units back and what it would look like. It's a great thing for students to be able to double dip, right? They're doing both things at the same time, and it's empowering for them, right? They get to see themselves as college students, and it's beneficial because they're starting their college careers. They get through their high school, you know, some of their high school units quickly as well. It's just there's no downside, right, to any of this, which is why we just felt it was so important to get it done.
And once again, I thank you for that thought. I didn't even think about that. But yes, one semester equals 1 year in high school.
Yep.
So I wasn't even thinking about that piece. I was just thinking for them to get started on college credits while they finish their high school diploma, but I didn't think about that. So thank you. Yes, definitely. Some of those, they take a history class, for instance, at the community college. It counts like a year of US history in high school.
Yep. So we
Yes.
use it a lot for the history classes, for English, for electives. We write for a lot of our adult school students, right? They need a lot of electives, and so they can take any class.
Correct.
And this definitely helps. Yeah, it's fun.
I think it's our time.
Yep.
I see the cane is coming out to pull us off the stage.
Yes, I popped back on.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to thank you again so much. I mean, everybody is kind of, a lot of people have held on to the very, very last moment to catch any words of wisdom from your team. So I do want to say thank you again to both Felisa and Janie, and as well as Janae for being here to assist them. We will have this recording available on the VFairs platform up through the holidays, and very likely will be available after that on our CAEP website. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day and the sessions that you choose to go to next.
Thank you. Happy Halloween, everybody.
And thank you, Renee, for your support.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. All right. Great job, Janie and Felisa. Thank you so much.